and welcome to this episode on my App Tutor TV. This week we're going to be looking at converting this quite dull camera raw image and converting it into an HDR image. Well, I say converting this, it's actually three images that have been merged, and we get a camera raw filter applied to them and being passed off from the Adobe HDR Pro element, and this is the resulting image. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, we're going to start off the episode here in Adobe Bridge. I have the three camera raw files here that we're going to use, and you can see by the suffix on them there, NEF files, which is the Nikon's version of a camera raw file. And you see when I select each one in turn, this one here has an EV value of -3, this one has nothing, it's basically 0, and this one has an EV value of +3. Now this will become more relevant when we actually get into HDR Pro, and I'll show you why. So let's just select all three of them, then come up to Tools, go down to where it says Photoshop, and then merge to HDR Pro. And after a second or two, they'll come into Photoshop, and then Photoshop will pass them off over to HDR Pro, which is a sort of plug-in within Photoshop. Now it takes a while because these are camera raw files and they're pretty big. And here we are in HDR Pro, and you see I've got my three separate images here, and it tells me the EV values. Now you will notice that they are slightly different to what we read before. It rounded them off in Adobe Bridge. So this one's actually +3.32, this one's 0, and this one here is -2.91. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is that the mode we're in is 32-bit. Now if you do this on your version of Photoshop, it might say 16-bit, which is the default. You need to change it to 32-bit because we are wanting to work with the raw file itself, which is a 32-bit file. We need to select Remove Ghosts, and what that does is if there's any elements in your images that for example it might be in this image here and it isn't in any of the others, well, you don't want it to be in there because it will look sort of see-through, i.e. a ghost. Next thing we want to do here, as you can see, is ensure that we have the checkbox complete the toning in Adobe Camera Raw, and then we click the tone in Adobe Camera Raw and wait for Photoshop to pass that off to Camera Raw, which will take a second. And here you go, it's passed it off into Adobe Camera Raw, and this is what the image looks like initially. Now remember, we are working with a raw file here, so we have all the options here exactly as we would in any other raw file that we brought into Camera Raw. You may notice that some of the tools in Camera Raw aren't present, and that is purely down to the fact that we are having this passed off to us from HDR Pro. So the first things I normally do is just come straight in here and click on the auto button to see what we get, and you see it brightens the image up straight away, and it also ensures that the shadow clipping warning or any shadow clipping that's in here is removed. As you see before that, if I put this to default, we had some clipping warnings here. So clicking auto removes them, and then we can start changing the dials in here to get the image that we want. Now traditionally HDR images, you would have seen them, they're quite vibrant with color, rich in quite detail. They show the highlights and they show the lowlights. Anything that's too dark, they bring out the detail in, and anything that's too bright, they tone it down to allow you to see the detail as well. So at the minute we've got that, we can pretty much see everything in this image. You know, this sky is quite it wasn't the brightest, but it wasn't completely dark. You had some details in it. These clouds you can see, but these areas down here were quite dark. We've managed to bring the detail out in them. So I'm going to leave the exposure slider exactly where it is, and what I'm going to change is initially I'm going to come in and just touch the clarity, and this brings out some of the detail in it. Maybe bring it up to about +30. I'm going to punch the vibrance up here because I like the rich colors that we get, and I don't want to do it too much. just enough. I'm just going to touch the saturation here just a little. Don't want to be too much with this because it can look a bit silly if it's too over saturated with the colors. Then we can bring the shadows out, or lighten the shadows. We can also just deal with the highlights in here just a touch, like so, and I always like to get the contrast nice and high. Now this is a good starting point, and a lot of people get to this and they can't quite get the image they want, and all I really do when I come to this point here is come to the FX down here, and I add a bit of post-crop vignetting. Now when you add dark to it, not only does it darken the edges of your image, but it actually sort of brings out the vibrance in the colors round the edges as well. Now you will notice we are losing a bit of detail down here, down the bottom in the shadow. So let's go back to our default sliders here and see if we can just bring the detail out just a touch more. Maybe we need to just touch with the exposure just a little bit. It's all to do with fiddling with it, and there we go. One last thing to do is just check any lens correction in here, remove any chromatic aberration if there is any, and once you're happy with that, let's just click OK, and it'll pass this off to Photoshop. Let's just Control 0 to maximize it in the viewport here, and this is what it looks like now, and that is what it looked like beforehand. So you can see we've got a lot of detail in here. There's one more thing we can do if it's not quite how you want it. This white area here is in fact a mask, and so we can click on the mask here, and then anything that is painted black will change what we see, and we'll just tap X on the keyboard to flip around our default colors, have our brush here, and I'll demonstrate. Let's just reduce the size of our brush. Now if I painted a black line across the sky here, you'll see, well, what it's doing is it's blocking out that camera raw filter. So although this looks really bizarre, I just wanted to do it to sort of demonstrate how I've painted this off here, and you can see this almost gives like a flash effect where we've had a flash quite brightly near it. And what we can do is we could come to this here, we could get the gradient tool in here, and I'll just select it under the paint bucket tool here, the gradient tool, ensure that we've got a foreground to background color here, and then let's drag this down, maybe start up here down to this area here, and you see it gives the effect of a flash firing, because if we come over to our filter here and alt click on it, this is in fact what we've got, and we can come in here and still paint this how we want. Pressing the little eye icon will bring everything back. Now that's not what you want, not a problem. We can just come into the history here, go down to this level here, which was the filter effect, and close it down. And that is how you can produce an HDR image in Photoshop.